Hello, today is Thursday, July 1st, and welcome to the 8:30 show. I'm KJ, and every Thursday night you'll find me here at 8:30 p.m. on YouTube at Metro Conservative Media. I'm also on Facebook at the same time at the same thing, Metro Conservative Media. Please hit the subscribe button. Uh, Join the conversation, comment on this video. We will be looking at your comments throughout the show and responding. Again, we appreciate the support. This is a show where I chat with various individuals about their conservative journey. Tonight, I am talking to Maria Sofia. She is chairwoman of the Maryland Young Republicans. And thank you. How's it going, Sophia?
Maria. Good. It's okay. I get it all the time. It's good, KJ. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Oh, happy to.
Yes. So, well, before we get into the meat of our discussion, I always like to do a quick rapid fire question and answer segment, so the audience can get to know you. So basically, it's just random questions, kind of fun questions, and then you just answer with the first response that comes to the top of your mind.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. All right. What's your favorite movie?
Oh gosh, right off the bat. So I'm an old movie fan. So obviously I'm kind of the stereotypical. I like Breakfast at Tiffany's, but one of my other favorites is definitely The Maltese Falcon for sure.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Which one of your friends would make the best U.S. president and why?
Oh God, the best U.S. president?
Yeah.
Which one of my friends? Gosh, I would have to say, it's a tough one.
You probably know a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm thinking of like all of my friends in YRs and everything else, but I probably would actually say my friend Evan Young, and the reason I'd say that is because Evan is very diplomatic. And he's very much straightforward in how he feels, and he just wants to get down and getting things done. So I think that's probably some of the more effective qualities that you'd want in a president.
Okay. All right. Let's see here. What is your most unpopular opinion?
My most unpopular opinion? Oh gosh. Probably.
It could be about anything. It doesn't have to be just about politics. It could be about politics or just random anything.
I guess I'll stay in politics in the sense that, I think I've been more supportive of Governor Hogan than I think some people in the party would say. But I've actually gotten to see a little bit behind the curtain and just see the kind of the leader and the way the administration is. So I'd have to say probably my opinion of Governor Hogan.
Okay. All right. And then what do you prefer? Comfortable silences or incredible conversations?
Sorry, what was the second one? You said uncomfortable silences and what?
Or incredible conversation.
Oh, I love incredible conversation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And what's one thing that you are most known for among your friends?
I'm known for my loyalty.
Okay.
I think that's probably like the one thing people say about me is like, people know who I am and they're like, but gosh darn it, Sophia. They always say like you're loyal to a fault. So I'd probably say my loyalty. Yeah.
Okay. And if you had to choose one of these, would you rather be vain or insecure? If you had to choose one.
Oh God. I'd rather be insecure probably, because I feel like, you can learn you can kind of get past that insecurity at some point when you can kind of fix that along the way. Vainness is that can very much turn you into a very ugly person. So I'd rather be insecure than be kind of seen as an uglier person like internally.
Okay. And then the last one, biggest misconception about Republicans. What do you think is the biggest misconception?
I think the biggest misconception is that people try to put us in boxes so much. I, in my time as a Republican and working on campaigns, and I know we can get into this a little later, everyone thinks a Republican has to look and sound a certain way. And we forget that we are that big tent party, and there are so many different kinds of Republicans, and being inclusive and accepting is actually a lot more popular, and it happens a lot more in the Republican Party than I think Democrats and people give us credit for.
Yeah, I think so too. That's a really, really good point. So, all right, well, that was our rapid fire round, so it's not too painful.
No worries.
Yeah. So next we will move right into pretty much the bulk of our conversation, which is, can you talk about your conservative journey? So have you always been conservative, and when did you start your conservative journey and become a Republican?
So my conservative journey is interesting because my family is not political, and they've never been at all. And to this day, my family isn't. I am the political person in my family. My grandfather he came to this country from Sicily after World War II, and he became a shoemaker, and he fixed shoes and briefcases and stuff. And he opened his own shop, and he would fix shoes and all of that. He had a store right outside of DC in Chevy Chase, and so a lot of like prominent Congress members would go to his shop and get his get things fixed there. So he always kind of had that that political kind of romance, if you will, of like loving how American government worked and like the policy part and stuff. But I didn't really talk about that with him. He passed away, ironically, my senior year of high school, and I never knew just how much he really loved politics, really, until after he passed. And just the people that he got to meet, just doing what he did, being just like a simple shoemaker. So when I got to college, I wanted to be an international studies major. And when I got into the curriculum, I realized it was very similar to political science. And then I joined this organization called the Maryland Student Legislature, which is a nonpartisan organization. It's a 501c3, and it's just for college students to understand how the Maryland legislature worked. So I went in not being political, really not knowing what to expect, and ultimately I registered Republican and everything because I learned about the two parties based on policy. So I became a conservative and a Republican, basically knowing how I was in the policies that I stood for, and just kind of aligning that way. And so
that's interesting because it's like you, because most college students don't know anything about the legislature or anything about how bills work, how Congress works. But you went in to do that, but you didn't have any type of political inclination. You just wanted to know about how laws are formed and things like that. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
That is exactly why I did it. In fact, I was a freshman when I obviously joined it, and then became I got elected. I moved up in the organization, so I became like the student secretary of state, the student lieutenant governor, and then my senior year became the first female governor from my college that ever got elected from my college, which was awesome.
Wow.
So it was super cool. And kind of like a little bit of a history for my university. They did a whole cool like spread on it for the website, so it was pretty sick.
Wow.
But I became.
And you didn't have to pick parties at that time.
No. So the great thing about it is you could caucus with like they because it's a nonprofit, they couldn't use the word Democrat or Republican, so they used like I think it was like Tory and Federalist. Okay. They use those words, so you're really learning like the roots of government that way. And so what we did in the organization was we wrote our own bills. And so we figured out how we felt on issues and how we stood on social things, from social issues to environment to policy and just all these different things. So I wrote different bills in my undergrad years. So I learned how it worked, and you had to get your bills passed. And then if you got them passed, then the student governor could sign them or they could veto them. So it was literally a mock legislature. So I didn't have to pick a party. I just got to write about the things that I cared about. And then I volunteered on my first campaign when I was 19 as a sophomore. One of my friends, her dad was running for office, but it was a nonpartisan office. So it was awesome. But they obviously conservative leaning. And then I volunteered on another nonpartisan race. And then I started volunteering on campaigns one after the other. And in 2014, I was starting to I was volunteering on these campaigns, and that's where I met, some of the people that we know now, like some of the people that are running. And it was really neat for me. It just kind of became this process of becoming who I was and what I stood for. And then by my senior year of college, I had done a couple campaigns and then volunteered on a congressional campaign. And then my first job out of college was the deputy field director for a congressional campaign. So I worked on campaigns, and then, I just kind of, it just snowballed into my career essentially. And so it really, the impetus of it all was just learning about policy and why I believe what I believe, without a letter next to it. So it was really
awesome.
neat and very organic. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what's missing, I believe, in the discourse now, and even in politics, is everyone has to know, what are you, who do you vote as, instead of what do you believe in, what's important to you, what do you think are the most important issues affecting your family or your community. So that's awesome. That's
it was
great
really cool
introduction. Yeah. And so when you think about when you finally decided to join the Republican Party, what was it that made you do that, especially as a young person? What issue or I know you were already, based off of what you're saying, you were kind of moving towards that. You came from a conservative background, but what issue, or what was it that really made you say, I want to be a Republican?
Well, I think one of the biggest things for me was I came from growing up, I went to private school. So school choice is a very big issue to me. I am a product of private schools, and I'm not ashamed of that. My parents made the choice to send me to a private school for elementary school and middle school and then high school. And then I chose to go to a Catholic conservative leaning, obviously, college. But that was my choice. But I'm a big fan of school choice. I think it's important. I think it's definitely a pathway to, fixing that infrastructure for education. And I'm very unapologetic about that. I'm also very much a fan of low taxes, obviously. I think that's really important. If we, lower taxes and allow, the people kind of impact the economy and not, putting a bunch of money into it, for lack of a better way of explaining it. But, fiscal issues for certain, education. And, I think overall, just, government efficiency, I think it just kind of makes common sense, at least to me. When you have a bunch of minds and opinions in government, it really kind of, clogs it up and it slows it down. So when you have that limited government and you have kind of less restrictions and less like hills you have to climb, you can get things done a little bit faster, and less regulation. It allows, things to kind of move forward. And I think that's kind of, unfortunately, what causes a lot of the red tape and the bureaucracy that we deal with, is having a clogged up government. And I think limited government is also, the way that we can move forward. But my third big thing is I am a big fan of local government. If you talk to anyone, my big focus, I love, and has become such a passion of mine, is municipal elections and just local level races, and understanding, how that all works and the real impact that local governments have on your everyday life, whether it be your council or your mayor or your commissioner, whatever that may be. A lot of the issues that we get so frustrated about, whether we're as Republicans or Democrats, we're talking about like property taxes. Ooh, sorry about that. Whether it be property taxes, sorry, there's a storm coming through. There's a storm coming through. Whether it be like property taxes, or things that we just get so frustrated about, it's our county council. And those are the people that ultimately cause us to, my light bulb just went out. Oh, that's
no.
Hold on. No. Oh man.
It was storming here earlier.
It's storming here. There it is. All right, there we go. I don't know why that did that. Anyway, so that was really weird. There's a storm coming through, thunderstorm, so I apologize. So limited government and municipal elections are something that I really care about. And you're talking about county council, property taxes are another thing. I mean, but again, we can ramble on about this all the time, but overall, I think it's just the big things for me are education, lower taxes, and then municipal government. Those are my big three things that I focus on as a conservative.
Okay. And then in the beginning of the broadcast, you talked about inclusivity. And so you as a young Republican, how do you see, or how have you seen the party change to become more inclusive over the last couple of years? Or do you believe that it's become more inclusive? And how's that dynamic changed over the last couple of years?
I think it has definitely become more inclusive. I think we're seeing that in our elected officials. I think we're seeing that in our party. Just here in Maryland, our party auxiliaries. We're seeing new auxiliaries kind of rise, and new auxiliaries that want to come into the fold, and I think that's really exciting for us. Obviously, shout out to the Young Republicans, College Republicans, Women's Federation, the Black Republican Council. I mean, we have so many support groups to the party that really show that full picture of who we are as a Republican Party. And I think it's absolutely important that we work together, and we all bring something very different to the table, but we also bring something that is very needed, and that is perspective and fresh voices. And when we talk about building a party and changing that dynamic of that perception, how Democrats view us and how the public views us, I think that's something that we can definitely lean on and be very happy about, because we're seeing it like physically, but we're also seeing it through kind of the policies that we've been pushing forward the past, at least the past decade, the minimum. But I definitely think we're seeing that. I've been really excited to see the record number of women running for office, and seeing just the people that are standing up and finally being like, you know what, I'm tired of this, and I'm going to let my voice be heard about the policies and the things that frustrate me.
Okay. Yeah, I totally agree. And again, I'm fairly new to the party, and I came in with so many different preconceived notions about what a Republican is, and how people relate to Republicans, and all of that has been kind of thrown to the wayside. So but I think a lot of people, especially in Baltimore City, because we're both in Maryland, so in the cities, people have certain misconceptions about Republicans. And what do you feel as far as the young people? How do you think the party can move forward with bringing in more urbanites and more African Americans within the party, and growing that base also?
Well, I'm going to lead on. I'm going to plug the Young Republicans for a second. And the principle, though I shouldn't say the principles, they are the principles, but the pillars that we stand on in the YRs are recruit, training, and electing. I think the first part of that is recruiting people by simply inviting them into, whether we have trainings or things that are going on in the community. But I think sometimes we often get caught up in the political aspect of that, and not realizing that we need to just kind of reach out to those mom and pop shops and the people that aren't necessarily political, but the people that are frustrated. And, I've been talking to a couple people in a couple different counties, because they're trying to find municipal candidates. And I'm like, just talk to that business owner that was shut down, because of COVID or whatever it may be, people that are just angry and frustrated. I mean, their platforms write themselves. So there's nothing more, I think, energizing to a community when they have someone that's really fired up about the issues. And, reaching out beyond our central committees and our auxiliaries to find candidates is going to be important. And whether it be the business owner or the outspoken parent at a PTA meeting, whatever it may be, we need to start looking in those avenues, taking those avenues and looking in those places to say, you know what, if we find that, that passionate parent that's mad about, whether it's critical race theory or whatever it may be, and say, hey, you know what, why don't you run for Board of Education? And then we find that business owner, and then you start talking to people that are mad about that. Maybe you should run for county council. And then you start turning it into then you're changing the conversation from a political conversation to a conversation where you're empowering the community to make that change themselves. And if we spend so much time trying to pick and choose between which central committee member or which political person should run for this seat, I think we're not doing our jobs, because we're just cycling the same people running for office, and we're not truly doing what we're supposed to do, which is doing that outreach and finding more people to join the party. I mean, voter registration is another thing that I think is kind of that entry level thing. I mean, Let's talk about, you know, maybe having some voter registration outside of, you know, PTA meetings. You know, there's a PTA meeting happening somewhere, or, who's to say someone can't just be in the parking lot being like, hey, you know, you want to register to vote? I mean, are you mad about this? You know, outside of county council meetings, you know, I think, you know, if we started doing some voter registration outside of some county council meetings and some local government hearings, and you've got some really angry people walking out of there, I bet you could find yourself a half dozen candidates that may be willing to put themselves on the ballot, and getting their contact information and starting them, you know, on that path to trying to get the tools they need in place to put together a proper campaign, which is where we can be helpful. So let's stop being cyclical and, you know, putting each other up on the ballot, and let's start finding people out in the community to do this.
Yeah, fresh faces. I totally agree. And so one thing that I like about the party is the individuality. And so we look at the whole individual. It's not so much of skin color or, you know, belief system or gender. It's just like, what do you believe? What issues are you passionate about? And it's about the individual. I really like that about the Republican Party. But in this kind of environment that we're in now, everything is kind of identity politics. And so within the Republican Party, you do have, of course, religious people, conservatives, evangelical conservatives. And I wanted to ask you, how do you feel, or how does that play with we just coming out of Pride Month? And so, you know, now, not now, well, we've already had these gay Republicans, but or LGBTQ Republicans. But how do they fare? How do they fit as far as within the party? Because my question, I'm sorry, this is long-winded, but
Okay.
why should we care about someone's sexual preference or gender? And how does that fit? And how do we grow people that section of America and bring them over to conservative?
Well, I think let me first start off by saying that any person, no matter their sexual orientation, their race, their creed, whatever, maybe should be treated fairly and equally to anyone else. I mean, you know, I was raised Catholic, so I mean, I get the kind of the debate there. But I have friends that are gay and that are Republican, and I don't think we should be. I don't think they should be kind of put in their own box. I think that if we're going to be a true big tent party, we need to welcome everyone. And I think that's probably one of the most important things, and probably one of the harder things that I think generationally that we've had to face. I think, you know, generations of old have a certain perception of it. And I think, you know, younger generations see it slightly differently. But I mean, you know, I don't judge. I mean, I let God judge on that. I don't play God at all on that. But I don't think that we should be, you know, turning away people in the party just based on that. Absolutely not, because there's a lot more to the party than just, you know, our race or our gender or our sexual orientation. We're all very different, and it's about the policies ultimately. And if we share those common policies, then I mean, why should we be kind of siloing people? And I think when we silo each other based on like things like that, we divide a party instead of uniting a party. And when we work together, we are much stronger and much better than I think the Democrats could ever be. And I think that's unfortunately been a problem at the party scene. And I'm not talking about Maryland. I'm just talking about nationally. As a Republican Party as a whole, I think we've done a heck of a lot better of being inclusive and inviting to all different people of all different kinds of backgrounds. So I definitely think there's a place for everyone in the Republican Party if they share our values. I don't think anyone should be treated differently. And I think ultimately, if we're working together and we're getting the job done and we're electing Republicans, then we should just keep trucking ahead.
All right. Yeah, I totally agree. We have some questions here.
Oh, okay.
So let me see. I just saw one and trying to get it back on.
Okay.
Well, Jackie Sackstein says, how can the YRs and the BRC and other auxiliaries best work together to welcome minority Republicans into our big tent party?
Oh, that's a great question. Hey, Jax, what's up?
Yeah.
I'm glad Jackie's watching. Well, I think the big part there is obviously collaboration. I think everyone in the party knows I'm pretty much a member of, I think, just about every auxiliary our party has.
Yeah, you're in the BRC too.
I am in the BRC as well. Because I think it's important. Look, between the BRC and the Women's Federation, the College Republicans, whatever it may be, we got to support each other. And I think going to Jackie's question about being inclusive to minorities, I think, it's about the messaging. It's talking about how we shouldn't be, I don't think we should be targeting people just based on their race. Like, oh my gosh, like there's like three black Republicans. We got to go catch them. Kind of like, that's not how we should approach it. I think if we have events that, offer that inclusivity, I think that's important. I think joint events like the BRC, having, their event, like the Juneteenth, for example, I think that was a great event. I was happy to be there, happy to sponsor that. But I think just supporting each other and doing events together, where we have things in common, whether it be policy, whether we do like, joint policy discussions or joint policy discussions, trainings, bring things to communities where maybe there's a bunch of unaffiliateds in a community and we go in there and we're like, hey, let's do a training together. Let's just talk about policy. Let's start a conversation. One of the things that I know I'm going to on a little bit of a tangent here. One of the things I'm going to just do a quick shout out to our Harford County Young Republicans. One of the things that they've been doing, which I love, is they're doing these roundtables, and they did a Second Amendment roundtable, and they just invited a bunch of people to have just a conversation about Second Amendment laws, getting HQL, and whether you're inviting people that are of minority or whatever, just having conversations and bringing people in on policy for policy discussion. I think we leave there with more information than we came in. And when we ultimately go out and talk to other conservatives, we are smarter and we are more well-versed on our principles and policies.
Yeah, I love conversation. That's what this show is about. Conversation, discussion about all kinds of issues, and sending that out to people who may not come to a Republican event and they say, oh, wow, this is what they talk about, or this is what they're about. So I totally agree. Again, guys, if you are watching, please comment. We are open to questions and we're looking at the comments and responding to them. I have with me again, the beautiful, the intelligent Maria Sofia. She is the Maryland Young Republicans Chairwoman. We have another one here from Bill Dumas. I hope I'm not pronouncing your last name incorrectly. What was your greatest accomplishment and or victory during the pandemic?
Oh, Bill Dumais. He is the vice chair of the DCYR. Shout out to the DCYRs for watching. Look at that. We got DCYRs watching. We got Maryland Wires watching. That's awesome.
Right. We got to get him on the show.
Bill's great. Bill has a podcast. I could plug the district download for him. He'll love me for that. Okay. They have a DCYR podcast, which is awesome. But my greatest accomplishment or victory during the pandemic, I think we, as an organization, at least for the YRs, we did a really good job of outreaching, I think, to counties and to people before, during the pandemic. But we were doing a lot of texting during the pandemic. And I thought that was actually unique. We were doing, I don't want to give too much of our strategy away, but we were texting prospective YRs in communities where we didn't have chapters. And we were engaging people. And honestly, it was great because we were kind of pulling people in through our website, increasing our traction on our email list. And we were just kind of getting our message out there. So we spent the pandemic a lot building up our social media presence and just getting more engagement. So then now that we're getting out of the pandemic, we're able to kind of start having those events in person and bringing those people out. So we were able to do that. And I think one of the other victories, I think during the pandemic was still being able to fundraise. The YRs were still able to fundraise throughout a pandemic. In the past 2 years alone, as the YR chair, I've fundraised over $25,000 for the YRs. So we're sending 30 engaged YRs to the national convention in Indianapolis in a couple of weeks, which we're thrilled about. And we're taking care of we're taking care of our YRs as they head out there. So we're really excited about that as well.
That's awesome. That is
Yeah.
incredible. Yes, and have another one from Nicole
Nicole!
Bennett, who is the chair of the Maryland Black Republican Council. And her question is, will YR and Chill be making a comeback soon?
Yeah. The short answer is to be determined.
Okay.
Pending obviously our election, but absolutely, I have every intention of bringing it back, revamping it for a second season. We had a lot of fun on YR and Chill. We did some good interviews, and I fully intend to bring that back for a second season. And I think going into an election year, particularly for 2022, we are not going to have any shortage of people that want to get on that show, especially because we share it around, and a lot of YRs around the country also watched it as well. So that's definitely a nice plug for them to be able to get some volunteers and some hopeful donations as well.
Okay. And lastly, I know we were speaking before we started the show about a poll that came out last week on Axios News, talking on Axios poll. It was actually on Fox News, talking about how young people are sort of declining on views on capitalism. So their positive views on capitalism are declining, and it's young Republicans. Have you seen that, and why do you think, if that's the case, it has happened, and what do you think we can do about that?
Well, I think there's two things to this. I think the first is when you're talking about the next generation of voters coming in, and the only experience with government that they have had is getting a check in the mail for stimulus checks and unemployment benefits or whatever that may be. Yeah, they're used to. They're used to getting those checks. And I think, there's almost a comfort level to that where there's no expectation of necessarily having to get back to work. So it's kind of comfy to them. So I can see a younger generation that's not really been out in the workforce really understanding, what a hard-earned paycheck feels like to an extent. I know I love working. I think I just get such joy out of it because you really feel like you have a purpose. So I think there's part of that, but I think the other part to it too, as a Republican Party, we just have to get people back to work. And I think if we get people back to work, I think that can change. But also making people understand the effects of that. If we have an economy that's based on stimulus checks and putting money into the economy in that way, the effects of it are you can't keep printing money forever. And so until I think this next generation really feels, how are we going to pay for it and how are we going to take care of that? And when they start feeling it through taxes and stuff, I don't think we'll quite kind of have their heads wrapped around that. But I am hopeful once we get people back to work that they'll really, and hopefully back to jobs that people enjoy, that they've gotten their degrees in or whatever it may be, where they really feel like they're being valued and that the hard work ethic that they've had will pay off.
Okay. All right. Wow, you got a lot of comments coming in here. I'm trying to keep up. I have one from Antonio Potato, who is
Antonio,
one of my favorite people. Yeah. He has here, biggest priority for engaging voters heading further into campaign season. That's a great question. Kind of
great question.
Earlier, but what do you think is the biggest?
I think the biggest priority when we're engaging voters is not only just to engage them, but like to make them feel like they want to be a part of it. Like, it's one thing to engage a person when you're door knocking, like, and you want them to vote for someone, but to engage them to a point where they just want to get involved. Like, you know what? I really like that candidate you're telling me about. Like, I want to now go help that person. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be a priority as we go out and as we're able to talk with more people, is to try to push people to take that next step and to take that next step to be, civically engaged. I think Democrats do a really good job of getting people civically engaged from a young age. And I think Republicans need to continue to do the same thing. I know YRs do it. I know CRs do it. I know all of our auxiliaries do it. And it's fantastic. But we must engage people where now they feel empowered that they need to do something, or that they can do something.
Okay. And I'm not sure if you've been watching, but I'm sure you have. But just within the last week or so, there was this big feud between Candace Owens and Kim Klacik. And I'm not going to get into all the
Oh,
details
I've been
about
following
it.
it. Yeah.
Okay. But one thing it did bring out is there are factions within the party who people feel like in cities have given up on cities. So who feel like the party is not interested in finding conservatives within cities and engaging. Do you agree with that notion? And if so, what do you think we can do about engaging people within the city, in urban cities, within Maryland, and really throughout the country, to grow the party in these areas?
Well, I think there's a couple ways we can go about this. And I was actually talking to a couple of Baltimore YRs about this a week or two ago about this, talking about the next 2 years, how do we engage people in the city, that kind of thing. And I think, one of the things that we can do as we look ahead is looking at obviously who is registered Republican already there. We have the ability to do that. And if we can engage those Republicans to kind of, join the fold and to kind of help out in that way, they'll have networks as well. But I think, we've talked about it and I'll bring it up again. We just have to go back to the policies of the party, where we actually empower the individual, empower the citizen to, take their career within their hands and just kind of run with it, whether it be being a small business owner or, becoming, I don't know, I'm blanking off the top of my head, but what, small business or a restaurant, whatever it may be, and letting people feel like that they can achieve their dreams. I think empowering people is the first step, besides politics. And I also think also in the city, we need to spend less time, I think, as a party, because I feel like we constantly, whenever we go in the city, it's almost for political reasons. And I think we need to engage it more from a community service perspective. And
not only that, but you need to come out and party in the city. You need to come out and party. I mean, there's so much, and you guys got to come out, and I can show you some different places, and it's not all what you see on news. It is a fun city to be in, and there's beautiful areas. And you guys, that's what we need to do. We need to do like a bus tour.
KJ, we've had Christmas parties in the city for YRs
a
couple times.
Yes,
we do get out there, but no, I think engaging people in different ways for sure, whether it be happy hours or having speakers or whatever it may be. But yeah, I think that's definitely an avenue, for sure. I think, the more variety that we add to our outreach, the different kinds of groups of people we reach. But yeah, I think that's certainly an avenue. Community service is another. But touching people, where they are, and just in having that candid conversation and not necessarily talk about politics, but lifting people up by their bootstraps and helping them do that, to kind of the phrase, you can give a man a fish, but you can, if you teach a man how to fish, they'll feed themselves for the rest of their life, or it's like, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, he can feed himself for a lifetime. But if we're just helping people, pick them up by their bootstraps, that's literally a core principle of the Republican Party, is lifting people up, to be the working man, and to build a life off of that. And we're showing people our principles without necessarily preaching those principles.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, we are coming to the end of our time. This has been such an informative and fun discussion with you, Maria. So one thing, you have a big election coming up, right?
I do.
How long have you been the Maryland YR chair? And is there anything you like to say as far as in regards to your upcoming election?
Well, I'll just touch on it. So I've been YR chair for the past 2 years. In Maryland, we actually have term limits for YR chair, which I think is super important for continuity purposes. And it requires you to it requires you to party build and to do succession planning. I was elected in 2019 in Frederick County, where we had our convention. And chairman or anyone on the board actually is allowed to serve two-year terms consecutively. So after 4 years, if you get elected and then you get reelected, you're only allowed to serve 4 consecutive years. Now you could take a break and then maybe run again, but that's typically not how that works. But which I think is important. In this case, I'm running for reelection. I've only served for 2 years as chair. And one of them was during a pandemic, which was a challenge in itself, but we overcame that. But our convention is a week from tomorrow. It is July 9th in Howard County. Registration is still open, and I think the credentialed members are the credentials committee is taking care of all of that. If you're a member of the YRs, you can reach out to them as well. But it's in Howard County. It's $25 for guests. We're supplying dinner. It's from 5 p.m. to I think 9 p.m. is what we have it timed for at the historic Oakland in Columbia.
Ooh,
and
nice.
Yeah, so we're really excited about it. I know we're going to have really good turnout from YRs. We have lots of them registered. I'm thrilled. It is quite the growth from what we saw 2 years ago. 2 years ago when I got elected, there was 9 eligible YRs in a conference room in Frederick County. So we have grown substantially in the 2 years. So I couldn't be prouder of how far we've come and the variety of chapters that we have and the work that each of them have done. Shout out to all of my chapter chairs for the great work that they've done. We do it together, and I'm just so proud of how far we've come. And I think that this coming week, as we gear up for that election, I think it's going to be really exciting to see everyone come to Columbia and come into town and have everyone in the same place. I think it's essentially the first time since really before the pandemic. So it's going to be an exciting time. I'm looking forward to it. Reed Novotny is our speaker for our dinner from Howard County. So we had a Howard County speaker. So we're really excited about it. And I think, we're going to have a brand new board. And I think it's going to be a really fun time. We're going through a change in the organization, in leadership when it comes to kind of as we get into that next chapter, if you will. So I'm excited to see it. And I'm looking forward to hopefully leading that next group of young leaders as we move into that next era, particularly in election season, which I think is very important as well. And probably going to be one of the most important elections that we have in Maryland for quite some time.
All righty. Well, again, I've definitely seen you all over the place, even throughout the pandemic. You've been out and about and definitely an active member in the VRC. So all the best to you in the election. I'm going to try to come. I haven't gotten a ticket yet. I'll probably try to get it this week. Yeah, as a guest. So definitely looking forward to that. Any last thoughts or anything else you'd like to shout out or say?
Sure. I'll just give a shout out to my YR board. I have a great, amazing YR board. My national committee woman, Jackie Saxton, who actually had a question today, is fantastic and has just done an incredible job. Evan Young, my national committee man, Melissa, my vice chair, Asia, my secretary, Jason, my treasurer. Everyone has done a phenomenal job in just moving our organization forward. And just hats off to them. And, I'm looking forward to seeing what the party brings in the next 2 years. I think next year we're going to put up some really great quality candidates that I think Democrats are going to have a really tough time running against, because ultimately we are the party of liberty and we are the party of freedom. And I think a lot of people are waking up and realizing that individual liberty and freedom is the future of this country. And frankly, is something that we need to have govern our legislation. So I think definitely as we move into it, it's going to be a fun time and getting people all geared up for campaign season.
All right. And I almost slipped my mind. I always ask every guest before we close, what is your number one hope for the community, your community, and then what is your number one concern? So you can start with your concern and then the hope.
Oh gosh. I think my biggest concern is I'll start with the concern. I think my biggest concern is kind of, how long is the effects of COVID going to impact our economy? And I'm talking even locally, like in my county of Montgomery County, we've seen so many businesses close. And I mean a lot. And so there's either going to be a lot of empty real estate or there's going to be a lot of new businesses, and how quickly that happens, whether it fills up, how quickly that fills up, or these buildings get converted to something else is definitely a concern, because, Montgomery County, at least where I live, it relies on that commerce of being able to, go out and have, social life and whatnot. So that's my biggest concern, that'll allow our economy to get back on track. My biggest, I should say, hope, did you say?
Yeah.
I think the biggest hope that I have is the more I talk to voters, the more I feel, I would say empowered, but I also feel hopeful that that people are waking up and realizing that, you know, they need to be active and they need to be engaged in their community, because if they don't speak up, then, you know, you can't rely on certain people to do it for you. If you care about an issue or something bothers you, you need to speak up. You need to go vote. I can't tell you how frustrating it is when I talk to people and they're like, oh, well, I vote every 4 years. It's like, no, you need to vote in your local elections. You need to vote in your primaries. It's important because then that impacts the candidates that we have down the road. A lot of people don't realize that, you know, municipal elections, that those are the benches for for as people move up to higher office. So, you know, we've seen it in our most liberal cities and we've seen it in our conservative ones too, but people move up from council to mayor pretty quickly. And I know you saw that in Baltimore City for sure.
Yeah.
So people need to care about that. But I think as we've moved through the pandemic and people have spent a lot of time at home and a lot of time to reflect, I think people are excited to get out. I think they're excited to be engaged. And I think that's going to end up being a very strong point for the Republican Party.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I agree with you, especially about the COVID. I live in downtown Baltimore in the South Point area, and I've seen so many businesses. Some of my favorite restaurants have closed. Some places that have been around for years and years. So I do hope and pray these places, they fill these spots with business, because it would be a big issue within this area. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
No problem.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, audience. Thank you guys for commenting and hanging in with us. Please share this video with your social media friends. Again, as conservatives, as people who want independent media, we want to get this out and support independent media. And the way to do that is to share and like and support and comment on the broadcast. So I really appreciate that tonight. So that wraps up another episode of the 8:30 show. What was I about to say?
That's okay, KJ.
Yes. Again, we love to get your feedback. We also have a webpage, so if you want to hear more about us, please visit www.metroconservativemedia.com. We do have additional shows. We have Poppin' Politics, which airs every Wednesday at 8 p.m., and we also have Gray Thoughts Matter. So learn more about those shows on the website. Also social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're on Twitter now, Be More Pop Stars. So definitely check that out. I hope to connect with you again next Thursday at the same time. Wishing you warm days and starry nights. Good night.